When I was a kid, Auckland Zoo had two elephants, Burma and Cashin. Cashin was a mascot for ASB Bank, a weird promotional stunt that the bank used to market to kids and get them to be early customers. In hindsight, it's pretty weird that the bank was doing this to primary school kids, right? Anyway, back in 2009, Cashin had to be euthanized at age 40. I remember this happening as a kid. It was pretty tragic, and it left poor Burma alone. With funding from the Auckland Council, the zoo was tasked with a years-long mission to acquire elephants from Sri Lanka. But unfortunately, this was embroidered in a political scandal. So back in 2013, the New Zealand government was campaigning to be a non-permanent member of the UN Security Council, an opportunity for smaller nations to sit at the big kids table and assist the UN Security Council to make big international decisions. The campaign was actually started by the last Labour government under Prime Minister Helen Clark. Being on the UN Security Council is a big deal for a small nation like New Zealand, trying to be seen by the rest of the world, and Prime Minister John Key seemed determined to get this win. To be voted into this position by other member countries, New Zealand would need to be seen as a leader on international affairs. Now, what was a big international event that was happening at the time? The end of the Sri Lankan Civil War. The war didn't have a great resolution, as there were claims of human rights abuses, war crimes, and a lack of reconciliation with the rebelling areas within Sri Lanka. This became an international discussion at the time, as the Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting, a big club of Commonwealth countries who come together to discuss international affairs, was being held in Sri Lanka. Many countries boycotted this meeting, with some having harsh comments about the Sri Lankan government.
In terms of the issues I raised with the President, well, it's the full set of issues that we've been discussing. The need for an independent inquiry into the events at the end of the war, the need for displaced people to be given homes and livelihoods, the need for human rights and journalistic freedoms, the need for reconciliation, the need to make sure that the right track is taken. As things stand, the Sri Lankan government don't accept the need for a full independent inquiry. They haven't established it. They have, of course, set up their own reconciliation commission, and that has done some good work, but I think this particular piece of work needs to be done. And the message I have is that, this issue isn't going to go away. This is an issue now of international concern. No, I'm very clear that we need a proper independent inquiry into what happened, particularly at the end of the war, where Channel 4, through that excellent documentary, have shown some truly chilling and appalling scenes. And my view is that if there isn't an independent inquiry soon, there ought to be an independent international inquiry. We do need to get to the bottom of what has happened.
However, John Key is not like other girls.
That I'm pretty casual and laid back and good for a laugh a lot of times.
And went to Sri Lanka anyway, using this as a way to campaign for that UN seat.
John Key is on something of a delicate mission of diplomacy in Sri Lanka. The Prime Minister has been at the Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting there, sharing drinks with David Cameron and Tony Abbott. He's also shoring up support for New Zealand to take a seat on the very powerful UN Security Council for 2015. But plenty of others are focusing their attentions on accusations of war crimes and human rights violations in Sri Lanka.
Now, around the same time, the Auckland Zoo had struck a deal to get two Sri Lankan elephants to come to New Zealand. The first elephant, Anjali, was confirmed in 2011, with a promise of another elephant in the future. Now back to John Key. While in Sri Lanka, Key took a soft stance on war crimes and the need for an international inquiry.
There's always got to be a degree of looking back if you're going to have successful reconciliation. And it's not that people who undertake war crimes shouldn't be held to account. They should, actually. On the other side of the coin, this was a very, very bloody civil war.
But I appreciate the New Zealand government position, and especially the Prime Minister and the Foreign Minister.
With many critics claiming that he was being too friendly with the Sri Lankan government.
Key says he made it clear during the meeting that Sri Lanka had to make more progress around human rights. Other Commonwealth leaders have taken a stronger stance than Key, including Britain's Prime Minister David Cameron, who's calling for an inquiry into the disappearance of thousands of Tamils at the end of the Civil War. What do you make of John Key saying things like useful, broad-ranging, making progress at the end of his meeting with the Sri Lankan President?
I think John Key has struck a middle ground position. He chose to go to Chogam, and of course a number of leaders, including those from Canada and India, chose not to because of both war crimes, alleged war crimes by the present government of Sri Lanka towards the end of the Civil War in 2009, also its failures to carry out domestic reconciliation with the Tamil community. There's also another dimension here, is that New Zealand is working hard to get onto the Security Council, and the vote for that will be taken in 2014, October 2014. And so presumably New Zealand wants the support of Sri Lanka and a number of other countries. There was, it was quite a large gathering at Chogam, not as large as usual, but quite substantial in Sri Lanka. So, yeah, I think there was a number of concerns framed New Zealand's position towards this issue, and one was winning support in the Security Council, another one was in making sure the trade relationship stayed on track with Sri Lanka.
This controversy deepened when the government announced they would be gifting New Zealand an elephant.
John Key appears to have won over his Sri Lankan host during this weekend's Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting, and New Zealand is being rewarded with an elephant.
The unusual gift is being signalled as a symbol of the two countries' friendship.
Can I also thank you for the agreements we've signed today and for the gift of a second elephant for the Auckland Zoo. As I was saying in our meetings, the first elephant has gained 700 kilograms in 1 year. So it is loving its life in New Zealand, and I'm sure its friend will have such a good time as well in New Zealand.
Now this is something that Sri Lanka seems to do a lot, gifting their political friends elephants. Here's one being gifted to American President Ronald Reagan, and others being given to Korea. This sort of elephant diplomacy seems similar to China giving panda bears to their friends and taking them back from their enemies.
Right. How do you own a panda? Fuck.
You don't. No, you just do.
I found this out yesterday. Do you know what panda diplomacy is?
No.
Dude, all pandas are on loan from China.
Oh, I do know this.
And no zoo owns panda.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you can only rent them. And apparently, because tensions are high right now, the Chinese government is taking all the pandas.
They're taking the pandas back.
Now this put everyone in a tight spot. The Auckland Zoo, they just wanted an elephant. John Key, he just wanted a seat on the Security Council, but now he's seen as elephant friends with potential war criminals.
Perhaps a little bit more uncomfortable for John Key now with this offer of an elephant, because New Zealand has taken a softer stance on issues such as war crimes here, so critics may argue we're now becoming too close a buddy to Sri Lanka.
Many people in the media were saying that the government should turn down this elephant. They shouldn't accept it, and the Auckland Zoo would be out an elephant.
Yeah, well, Auckland Zoo, we understand, has been working for a couple of years now to try and get this Sri Lankan elephant here. But certainly, make no mistake, that would not happen without authorisation from the Sri Lankan government. So a bit of a bolt from the blue that's now being tied in some ways by Basil Rajapaksa to New Zealand's relationship with Sri Lanka.
Additionally, animal rights groups were not happy about this, who actually took the Sri Lankan government to court over this. Their position was that the elephant Nandi had already bonded with other elephants in Sri Lanka and shouldn't be just given away as a political gift, that the well-being of the elephant should come first. And this is still an ongoing issue, with no resolution in the Sri Lankan courts years later. Since that time, New Zealand got that seat on the UN Security Council. John Key resigned as Prime Minister. We've actually had 4 Prime Ministers since him, and the entire elephant program in Auckland Zoo has been shut down. After failing artificial insemination, the Auckland Zoo decided, as they don't have a big enough herd in New Zealand for breeding, that it's best to send the elephants to zoos in Australia. Now New Zealand has no elephants. One might argue that if John Key had taken a bolder stance on war crimes in Sri Lanka, he wouldn't be elephant friends with their government, and Auckland Zoo would have got those elephants that they initially planned. So I guess there is a slight happy ending after all, that we can make it all John Key's fault.
That's been very silly on my part.